Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you all for making it here on this very cold night. My name is Eden, and I'm interning at the Grolier this semester. We're going to have Jennifer Clarvoe introduce our lovely readers for you all tonight. But before that happens, we just wanted to ask that if you brought cell phones with you, to please silence them. So if you don't think you did that, take it out now and silence it. And without further ado, here is Jennifer Clarvoe.
You, Eden. And I will just add, if you are watching this virtually, to make sure that you're muted as well. Since we won't notice that here, but it shows up in the recording. Welcome, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here in the Grolier, which I think of as the house of poetry. And I'm very grateful to those who take care of this house and the poets who live in it and read in it, especially to interns like Eden and to James, who welcomes us all in and makes this house of poetry a home. It's also a terrific honor to be asked to introduce tonight's poets, David Miller, Jen Schreiber, and Cammy Thomas, who will read in that order. I will introduce all three of them at the start, and I will read for about 15 minutes each. One of these poets I met more than 40 years ago in a classroom in California. One of them I met over the last 5 years online and in post-pandemic local readings. One of them, whose work I've met in journals, I'm meeting for the first time tonight in person. I appreciate the opportunity of introducing them to learn a little bit more about all of them together and to think about what kind of constellation the poems of these three different poets might make. So I wanted to say something a little bit general about all three before filling you in on the backgrounds of each one. One quality that I think all three of these poets have in common is something that the writer Italo Calvino called lightness or leggerezza in his book, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. He wrote that about 40 years ago in anticipation of changes in the coming millennium and changes in human lives, changes in art, trying to zero in on the qualities that he thought were most important in art, especially what is it that only literature can give us, only through the means of literature. And the first quality he describes is lightness. And by that, he did not mean lightness as frivolity, lightness as an escape from what he understood as the increasing weightiness and inertia and petrification of life, but lightness as something that helps us carry our burdens with grace, carry it more lightly. And that's something that he thought that literature could do. He says, whenever humanity seems condemned to heaviness, this is Calvino, I think I should like to fly like Perseus into a different space. I don't mean escaping into the dreams or the irrational. I mean that I have to change my approach, to look at the world from a different perspective with a different logic and fresh methods of cognition. What matters is the search for lightness as a reaction to the weight of living, not an escape from that weight, but to help us carry our burdens lightly and with grace. And I do think that David Miller and Jen Schreiber and Cammy Thomas, each in quite different ways, manifests in their work something of this lightness, of an ability to come at matters, maybe especially heavy ones, but they don't feel heavy, from an angle that refreshes them and refreshes us and reminds us of something essential in human ingenuity that can help us navigate whatever shocking, grotesque, or dramatic things the present moment, unforeseen by Calvino, might hand to us. So I'll say a little bit more about the background of each of these three, and then turn them over to you to hear that lightness, that grace. David Miller, whom I have met mostly in his capacity as program coordinator at the New England Poetry. All right, what does the C stand for? Club. I was thinking community club, NPC. His collection of poems, Sprawled Asleep, was published by Nixes Mate Books in 2019. His chapbook, The After Images, was published by Cervena Barva Press in 2014. His poem, Add One Father to Earth, included in his latest book, Bend in the Stair, was awarded an honorable mention by Robert Pinsky for the NEPC's 2019 Samuel Washington Allen Prize. David was a member of the multidisciplinary Mobius Arts Group of Boston for 25 years. He was a librarian at Curry College, from which he retired in 2018. He and his wife, the visual artist Jane Wiley, live in Jamaica Plain. The poet Zvinia Orlovsky writes that Miller's poems, quote, capture the benchmarks of a life through a surreal lens, heightening each moment with his verbal magic. His precise imagistic inquiries spark off the page, then settle deep into the heart. Second poet, Jan Schreiber. I first encountered his work in the pages of Literary Matters, where one can admire his critical thinking, soon to appear in his book, Breath Lines, How Poems Work and Why They Matter, forthcoming in May from LSU Press. Or one could marvel at his translations from the French poet Valéry, now connected in his 2021 volume, or his own poems included in several volumes, most recently Peccadilloes and Bay Leaves. He stuttered under the great poet J.D. Cunningham at Brandeis, where he got his PhD, and then pursued research in mental health and criminal justice, running the Social Science Research Institute for several years. He also ran a software company. Since his retirement, he has taught poetry at the Brandeis Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. The poet Frederick Turner says Schreiber's voice is rational, aware, detached, compassionate, unassuming yet assured, unconsciously charming, grown up, quietly hilarious, and serious as death. Again, there's that levity and gravity that it seems to me like that quality of lightness. Cammy Thomas, well, I'll keep you here the next hour talking about Cammy because I have known her forever. But I will say she is the author of 4 books of poems. The first, Cathedral of Wish, which won the Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America. The second, Inscriptions, which she wrote in part with the help of a fellowship from the Ragdale Foundation. Her third wonderful book, Tremors, received poetry honors from the 2022 Massachusetts Book Awards. All 3 are available from 4-Way Books. Her most recent book is Odysseus's Daughter, Poems Written in Response to the Odyssey, which she taught for many years. She received her BA and PhD from the University of California at Berkeley, where she wrote a critical dissertation on Tennyson. She later received her MFA in poetry at Warren Wilson College. She's taught literature and creative writing for many years and lives in Acton, Massachusetts. Her poems are funny, grounded, spooky, luminous, and heartbreaking. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn things over to the poets.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is rather a dream. Thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction. It's given me a lot to think about, actually. And of course, thank you to James and to everyone here at the Grolier for making this possible. And I do have to say, there's one thing I've always wanted to find a reason to say. Hello out there in TV land. Thank you for being with us. So I'm going to read, oh really? I'm going to read 4 poems from a new manuscript which has just started to find its way out into the world. And then I will read 2 poems from Bend and the Stair. That's not very many poems. That is because one of the poems from Bend and the Stair is a long poem. So this will be enough. I'll read. So from the new manuscript has a working title of Yes, All of Them. Will the published book be called that? I don't know. But that's the title. And I'll read two poems from near the beginning of the manuscript as it's now laid out, and then the final 2 as it is now laid out. So first one's a form of a dialogue, so I'll attempt to enact that. Questions for Mother. What was your earliest memory? My sister's eyes, her braids like vines over my crib. How did you learn to play the piano? I heard Paderewski's Minuet or Chopin. My hands became the blueprints. What is perfect pitch like? It's as if there are 12 unique forms of sounding glass. I hear and see them at once. How did it feel to sing? My head was filled with Tibetan bowls. Why did you go steady with my father? Because I heard oak and maple when he spoke my name. Why did you leave college after you got married? Only virgins go to college. Was that true? You make me laugh. That was the girl's alma mater. Why did you go back to work? I was home with the dog. My eyes raked the rooms of our house. There were no fresh replies. What was your first job? Walking into traffic and holding my arms out. You lifted your arms, your hands swam, also for my children's choirs, my chorale of women. What did singers bring you? Murmurations, shimmers. Why did you both leave for Florida? I lay next to your father, heard his lungs scrape in wintertime, and the walls of your hometown came closer and closer. What did you find there? My skin sung to me every day at first. What can you tell me about the nursing home? I busted out of that place once. God stood me back on my feet. The nurses ran toward me. How long did that last? Until my sentences failed again. What was the last sound you heard? Circles of glass, within circles, within circles. Are there other questions I should ask you? Yes, all of them. The bones. There is a skull beneath my hand. Fingers across my face probe the frame under its canopy of skin. The planes, arches, hinges, essential knoll, 2 kettle bowls, the full set of Yorick's teeth. The bones say, don't worry about your forehead furrows. Don't fret about your temple's mole-like spot. Don't be too obsessed about weed wacky brows, raccoon eye rings, dimples you never liked anyway, gone to crevasses. Nostril hair you prune and hate. Keep up the fight, but don't make it your life's mission. All that is decoration. And that covering you wear, your scant melanin allotment, first thing anyone sees of you? Listen, how many more favors will that wrapper buy before it melts? We, the bones, care nothing for your fragile drapery. The other 2, I say the last 2 in the manuscript, and they are both dedicated to my wife, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, but I think she may be out there. So 2 more here. Who watches over me? The angel of good enough most of the time. The angel of this will do for now. Yes, they wedged the shower stall into the kitchen. They'll inform you that plumbing is plumbing. They shoulder tap me when 2 of my 3 pairs of jeans are torn, so I can buy a 4th before the 3rd rips, too, not fashionably. Nor am I ripped in any sense, but my body coheres normal-ish as expected until further notice. The angel of eventual reminders keeps his own list of tasks not more than a month out of date. He's good at not rescheduling my appointments after they've happened. He's okay, if you ask, though the unasked angels of your best possible self furrow their brows. Only okay? Tut tut, they're a teensy bit appalled. What's the issue, my own angels, that I want to know? I may not own a sofa, but I have enough chairs. My angels are very pleased with themselves when they think about how my wife and I met. Someday I'll get around to telling them they weren't on that case at all. That was the angel of luminous stellar explosion, aka the angel of primordial singularity, who jumped the wormhole, birthed the extravaganza, vanished while the other celestials were scratching their heads, searching my fridge for the substitute margarine. And then there we are. 2 apartments and the moon. Those years I slept narrow on a pushed-shut sofa bed. Apartment house roof lines packed both sides of the close street. The moon never claimed the night in that room. Streetlight neutered its traces, as did the tired bedsheet, abandoned by someone else's one-time apartment mate, curtaining my single window. When, in my decades shared with you, I come to my feet at 1 a.m., pause at the kitchen window, moonlight's full expanse drapes the floor, lifts the previous day's diseased news like a draw of bad blood. It will find me at 4 if again I'm restless, up and wandering to the front window and the still street. If I pretend to speak for it, it says, stop and look up now. Fullness is not always with you. So we'll move over to the 2 poems from Bend in the Stair. I will read the first one in the book and the next to last one in the book. First one effectively serves as an introduction to the second one. And combined, they run about 8 minutes if you pay attention to that kind of thing, just so you know how to pace your listening, maybe. And the second poem I'll say now is in 6 parts, but here's the first one. Retrieving my father's ashes on my birthday. It took fewer days for him to carry me home, lay me in the crib, than for me to carry him home, place him on a bedroom closet shelf among the bare clothes hangers. His wordless gray grit, compacted in the reticent plastic box, weighs about what I did, pissing, screeching, astounded. And, pardon me. Is this water available? Anybody?
Go for it.
Thank
I
you.
haven't touched it.
Just a teens. Here we are, in 6 parts. Add one father to earth. 1. Shelved where his shoes had been, his unrested ashes waited in a black-lidded box in stout plastic, held close in his vacant clothes closet, above the hamper where I threw the garments he wore to ride in his final ambulance. After 16 weeks, I carried them through the Florida city. At the airport, they were scanned with a smile for explosives. In Massachusetts, his ashes rode with us past a weed-ridden car dealership. No one but me remembers the small town lunch spot in that place. We scavenged our first nothing open Sunday sandwiches there. One last trip past that obliterated memory on the way to the church of dwindling recollections, church for 30 years before my parents' migration toward lawn egrets and ditches for stormwater. Returned back from paradise to the church where my father troweled my mother's remains 7 years before, where we then committed his. So much human grit. 17 people stooped to the earth. Now it settles in earth, uncoffined, unmarked, fluid as matter through matter. A remnant preserved for my desk in a modest marble urn before me on a blue October with its stubborn city greenness of trees. 2. He lifted his free right arm from beneath his hospital blanket. Forced speechless by the apparatus propelling his lungs, he opened his hand toward us, his fingers curved one by one in a cascade against his palm, little finger rippling toward index finger. He did this 3 times. We saw it, the gentle opening and graceful closing of his grip. We didn't understand. He then spread his palm to face us, moved it side to side, out in towards and out away from him. This we understood because as children, we learned to wave when it was time to go from someone. But first, he spread and curled his fingers to grasp no one's offered hand. I saw this and I blanked. When I first held the density of his remains, I realized what he had asked of us. I knew it only then. 3. 16 weeks stillness on his closet shelf, the closet in service to their bedroom. Waking one morning, he told my mother he couldn't do it anymore, could not, could no longer lift her, walk her, feed her. A nursing home opened to her before sundown. 16 weeks sacked in resolute plastic, necked by a dog tag, in a snap brim box, in a floral yellow shopping bag of sympathy. 4. Famished family, lost without lunch in our new little town. Sunday noon in 1963. Lord's Day, we're closed. Nothing in the cupboard. The movers left us. We hauled our trek from Corn Country, Indiana to Tobacco Shed, Massachusetts, the best asparagus earth on earth. The Gronostalski onion truck, prodigious Polish name, festooned wide in paint, fading even then. Stan the vegetable man, whose beacon sign, blazoned a man, figured yes of vegetables. These decaying stalwarts still held the roadside 50 years later, wayposts for homecomers. But brand new then, still lunchless, we roamed Route 9 in the Red Rambler, 3 cranky boys, 2 disoriented parents. Who could tell how this little lunch place arose like a vision? The Spruce Hill Restaurant, a brigadoon of sandwiches. That eatery of the first day of the rest of our lives. At some erased moment between then and now, the slope-roofed lunchbox poked its sides out, glassed its front to sell autos, failed quickly. These are its stubborn, barren windows, shameless stains, opportunist weeds, souvenir I remember and reject. Something of my father goes for his final ride past our first meal. And I want to challenge someone. Find the strength to take this forsaken hulk, render it to atoms, lay it down. 5. Grit, the color of faint after feathers, in an equable porcelain bowl set near dugout earth. A car radio edges the church sidewalk beyond the garden. The thought of entertainment by subwoofer serenade frets me. And there is a lot of ash. 4 sons, 2 wives, 2 girlfriends, grandson. Each settles a ceremonial scoopful in the empty space. Still, there is much ash. I call to the witnesses, make impromptu community event of this. 4 cousins, 2 husbands put their hands to the work. Sister-in-laws, father and stepmother take it up, each in stillness, with their minds arcing toward the trowel, its mass. Christ, there is so much ash left. I squat, take the bowl at the lip, empty his persisting remains directly into the gape, like cups of flour into a mixing bowl. I don't want that image, but maybe it is that image. Add 1 father to earth, cover and let stand overnight. Let stand permanently. 6. Let stand permanently that tablespoon worth of him saved before passage through the airport, before passing the first lunch ruin, before the memorial garden, saved for a desktop urn, veined in lightning bolts of rust red with patches of near white like elderly skin. Marble monument cool against my palm, fingers wrapped like tendrils around the jar. Fragment or fractal of the gravestone he refused with adamance. He would not be left as a site of pilgrimage, a chiseled name filled over time with lichen, a site of contrite visits, first rare, then none. Instead, he is home with me, while my home persists, before me in the shifting late October sun. I close my eyes against the waxing daylight, open them upon his urn again in the temporary darkness. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming out on a cold night, and thanks so much to Grolier, all the people at Grolier who have made these readings possible. I'm going to read a group of poems punctuated by a few short poems, and then another group and another mess of short poems, and finish off with 3 more. None of them are too long. The first one is called The Road to Nowhere, and I think as I read it, it'll become self-explanatory. No one knew why he built a road over a mountain. It started close to home and wound through trees, past cliffs not visited in years, bound for the sea, but stopped before it got there, somewhere halfway down a hill. They said, why build a road that goes nowhere? But it goes somewhere. It goes out to a rocky shelf that overlooks the steady, unceasing breakers far below the traveler who moves while standing still. Perhaps if it were finished, but it will never be finished. It runs toward, not to the sea, an arc, a proposition in geometry, a brief infinity of points along a finite line. It was for him a mode of recall of the son who loved this place and years before, despairing or in madness, killed himself. Walking the road, he saw what could not be left out in the many tellings. It made a kind of solace, yielding to rocks and shadows at the end of order. He waited for the long susurrus in the trees, brushing across the land like half-formed memory, or like the coming rain. This one is closer to home and more informal. Written on getting up in the morning. It's called Closet Meditation. I'm afraid half my shirts are frayed, but I can't throw them out. Even the torn one stays. You never know when you might need to do a messy job, unstop a drain or grout the bathroom floor. Other shirts are almost new. They're for the days I'll have to give a lecture or sit for a TV interview. There've been none recently that I recall. Mostly I'm here alone. I write. I wouldn't have to wear a shirt at all. Yet it sets a tone. But what's the tone I want today? I might decide a shirt of bold design wouldn't be bad, so that perhaps if you dropped in, you'd like the plaid and never see the loosening threads, the early signs of imminent decay that would remind you just how surreptitiously all our wraps can fall away. My wife is a painter, and occasionally we get in a situation where I have to deal with a painting. This is called The Portrait. I watch her measuring me, her glance fleeing to her palette once, then back dissatisfied. Look left, don't turn your head, just eyes. She sees me frown and likes it. Hold that. As she is reassembling me, I build her look by look. Her indecision is in fact a rapid weighing made elusive by the narrowed eye. In line and shape, she captures me looking across the water into a time that only I, uncertain where time went, remember or invent. And she, I hold her in a nest of shadows, wrap her in a web of words, but do I have her so? How would I know? Each of us grasps a semblance sealed in flesh, while something else, yet undefined, tugs at the mind. No capture is complete. Beyond us, the mirrored lake, untroubled by the breeze, mists while we're unaware into dissolving air. Now here are a few little short ones. This one is called Camera Obscura. Who can retrieve from fallen spray, or guess from altered sand or air, the wave just passed, caught in the eye, vanished, but still unfurling there. And I gave myself the exercise some time ago of trying to write a poem that you could read both forward and backward. It's essentially a palindrome. And it goes like this. Cassandra grieves and fears all remedies illusion. Illusion remedies all fears and grieves Cassandra. This one is called The Sheik's Lament. My love is like a camel. She rations wet delights. One hump she needs to travel through 6 long desert nights. The 7th brings oasis, tall palm and grassy hill. When we come to refresh us, oh, then she drinks her fill. And this one was written some time ago. It's called Humility. I thought my first book not so bad until the Times engaged a lad to lacerate it on page 9. Casting my pearls before benign obtuseness was a clever trick. Every ego needs a prick. Okay, back to more serious poems. This one is called Cormorants. We have a lot of seabirds on the island of Vinalhaven where I spend summers. Cormorants. Black and sleek as steely-eyed deacons, ascetic and aloof, the cormorants disdain the jostling waves, riding peaks and troughs placid as flatirons. one suddenly upends and disappears a full minute or more, some 50 yards away, emerging. Praying and gorging, they float fastidious, always unruffled, unperturbed by appetite. Though half submerged, they do aspire. Persuaded finally into flight, they gather speed and skip tiptoe on wave tips like flat stones flung sidearm from the shore, wings flailing. Full bellies when they would be light, belie the anorexic prose, rob them of grace. With difficulty they enter heaven, rise and take dominion, running unopposed. And this is called Night Piece for Anna. Anna is a cat, but the other figure in the poem is again my wife, the painter. Still in the waning light, as orange clouds marbleize what was a silver sky, and pines at water's edge darken to silhouette, still are you leaning there to capture with your brush the nuances of glowing alive yet to your eye. Below you, on the ledge, warmth fading from the air, the old cat stares at dusk, watching the dark shapes massing. What spirit aids the unknowing witnesses of the storm, helpless against all harm, whose alert eyes still trap the fading light and keep watch and do not weep their short days passing? And this poem is called All the Bright Illusions, and it's in memory of my brother-in-law, Sam Fox, who died a few years ago. In a charmed summer garden among the fruit trees where we walked along the wall, we barely noticed it. At one point, when you leaned against it, it gave way. There was a sudden breeze. You were no longer there. Bird cries did not abate, and the stream went on flowing. Small creatures scurried. How can a man evaporate? Time turns a corner, and the world as it was yesterday afternoon, but for that sleight of hand. I'm wise and damaged now. Give me some time to rest. All the bright illusions I loved are giving way. Okay, time for a couple more short ones. This one is called A Man is But a Fleeting Flower. She always craved a single perfect rose, but no one form embodies all perfection. So she embraced the dozens that came close and knew her heart's ideal by indirection. This one is called The Angler. Pompous had found a worthy mark at last. Young and amazed, she dotes upon his airs, swallowing lines he's practiced years to cast. She strikes, he reels as they go up the stairs. And this one is called A Change of Heart. She always said the smart ones were depressed and that her husband didn't pass the test. It wasn't till he died that she felt doubt. Surprised he had the brains to blow them out. Oh, dear. This poem was actually written about 1,200 years ago. It was originally written by the Chinese poet Bai Juyi, who lived in the Tang Dynasty from 772 to 846. And a couple of his poems were translated by Arthur Waley at the early part of the 20th century. And I took a couple of them and turned them into a sonnet that Bai Juyi might have written. Just why she should have mattered, I can't say. Only a daughter, after all, too young to revel in the sort of verbal play my friends enjoy. Yet even while among those wits, I'd find myself recalling her small arms around my neck, and how at 3 she lisped a kind of music I prefer to their sophisticated repartee. And when she died, I struggled to recall my old self, to forget. And I'd rehearse the duties facing me to keep the black ox from my foot. 3 times in calm the fall leaves turned. But then this morning her old nurse appeared, and all my grief came flooding back. A few years back, my friend Ed Dean, who is in the audience here, and I owned a boat together. And every fall, we would have to take it into town and have it hoisted up and put in dry dock. So this poem is about that. It's called Dry Dock. Over jagged gray waves, they're rowing toward the blue boat bobbing at its mooring. Late October, 2 old men bent to the sky. The air is chill, the boat unsteady as they climb over the side to find their balance on the deck. They have lost track of time. The motor coughs and roars. Then one unties the line, the other turns and steers out of the cove's embrace, skirting the subtle reefs, passing over the wrecks. The tide is low. Long swells push them to speed their course, hug the shore's devious breast. White froth lathers the rocks. Rounding the fir-clad islands, they thread through harbor craft to reach the pier and pilings. What strangers here? What welcome in time-worn planks and stone? Now the boat's hoisted high aloft in alien air. Summer, so sweet and rapt, has flared and guttered while its essence has escaped. Which way to town? The street curves out of sight. The wind picks up. Spatters of rain announce the onset of a storm. It feels like sleet. And finally, I'll close with a love poem. This is called Aftermath. We lay together, skin to skin, so long it seemed we might sink in each to the other and create, as atoms interpenetrate, a new and selfless hybrid thing, fusing 2 selves, embodying their double substance in each ply, as 2 damp bars of soap that lie adjacent will in time converge, defying all efforts to unmerge. But living creatures must obey the restless urge to pull away, and particles, still yours and mine, eventually disentwine, leaving a lasting trace, it's true, an immaterial residue that alters minds and softens hearts and may affect some other parts. Our bodies share a secret peace long after all their revels cease. Thank you.
Wow. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much all for being here. It's really great. And it is freezing out there too. And thanks for everybody for being on Zoom as well. Really appreciate that. I'm incredibly honored actually to read here. It's a thrill. It really is. This is sort of the base of it all. And I'm thankful to you, James. Thank you very much. And Ewan, did I get your name right?
Yeah.
Eden, I'm sorry, I apologize. Thank you so much. Who turns out to be a schoolmate of my niece who's sitting in the back. How about that? And thank you for those beautiful poems, both of you. It was really a thrill to hear them. And of course, Jennifer and I spoke once a week the entire time of COVID, just talking about poetry and a lot of other things too. But we kind of kept each other going during a very hard time. So from graduate student days on, thank you very, very much. I'm going to read just a few new poems. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then poems from my most recent book, Responding to the Odyssey. Figure out how to do this without a table. So these are the new poems. Should get my fingers to work properly. All right. There is no touch except compassion. The guy who rides his mower over our lawn became pastor of a tiny church when both the other pastors suddenly died. He had to find a way into the bank account to take care of church business. Part of our lawn is a large, steep hill. When we moved in, he said he'd been mowing it for 30 years. I can't watch. He goes back and forth across it, reversing direction by backing a little up the hill and swinging around. And as the machine tips slightly up, I imagine him falling, the machine rolling over him, tumbling down the hill into the road. But without his mowing, the trees would start to grow and box us in. Should I try to stop him, even though he believes he's safe? A modest man, he mows with confidence that his God will let him do his work without restraint and help him find the password at the bank. So this next one is, I guess, what I would say, especially for Jan, because Jan knows his forms, I can see. It's almost a villanelle. It's got the right rhyme scheme and line numbers, but it's 4 beats instead of 5 beats per line. So, you know, for those of you who don't know, there are some repeating lines. You'll hear that as we go in a kind of a regular pattern. It's called Wrapped, and that's R-A-P-T. I loved his fever blue eyes like a sign. We kissed in the garden, out of sight. His wrapped heart will never find mine. Once, when his hair was red and fine, he swam to me in a fire too bright. I loved his fever blue eyes like a sign. I haunted, I craved him, I crossed the line. But he slept all day and roamed at night. His wrapped heart never found mine. His spirit got crushed by Saigon, by time. The worm, the chrysalis ran out of fight. I loved his fever blue eyes like a sign. He lived in quiet, in frost and rhyme, backing away and always in flight. His wrapped heart could never find mine. And now he's passed out of any rhyme, escaped alone, which for him was right. His wrapped heart will never find mine. I see his fever blue eyes like a sign. This next one, I was very worried that I had a brain tumor because and maybe I do, but some time has gone by. I kept smelling something that wasn't there. So this is about that, and it's called Stink. I smell something like burning rubber with sugar, very strong, but coming from where? Something chemical, something poisonous, but maybe not there. Am I dreaming dread? I get up, look under the bed. The hot chemical stink pierces my nose, but all is still and quiet, just dust. In the yard, I smell burning, but see no fires, just black sky, hot stars. Walk through my empty house, moon stripes on the floor, faint sounds of water, dishwasher cycling. I sniff its latch, but nothing. Metallic ozone. The stove is cold, the world silent, this smell permeating me. War smell, waste smell, petroleum sugar. This is the last of the new ones. And at the moment, it's called Song. Oh, my children, you eclipsed my trouble, my funereal, dusky wings. Your myrtle, your summer swinging on the wheel, lifted my ghost out of snow. My children, I wait in the winter garden. I hover over your nightfall, your cracked banners, the copper threads in your hair like ancient constellations. And your names, Holy Nurse, First Light. My children, how you race in the hailstones like horses warm and shadowed. I, gnarled, fibrous, silver-spotted ghost, kneel and give thanks. My new book, Odysseus's Daughter, is my first letterpress book. Feels nice. And this cover drawing is by my brother. It was an art emergency I can fill you in on later, but he really came through. And there's a tiny owl flying on the back too. I wrote this book over 15 years. I was teaching the Odyssey every semester, Fagel's translation. It sank into me until I started writing poems back to it, just giving voice to some of the characters. A lot of you here probably know the Odyssey a lot better than I do, but just in case, the Odyssey is the story of the Greek hero Odysseus, his return home to Ithaca after the Trojan War. The war took 10 years to win, and the return home also takes 10 years of amazing adventures. I'm just going to read several poems. On the way home, all Odysseus's mariners die. Here's an anonymous one who was lost at sea after Odysseus blinded and then taunted the huge one-eyed Cyclops. This mariner is speaking from the underworld. After the Cyclops. We ran to our ships, and when the gouged monster threw rocks the size of mountaintops, I was swept overboard in backwash, spun under, banged by planks, my blood threading the oily waves. No one saw me go. How unfair to die after we survived the war, which went so long, the fields around the city were soaked sterile. I had a home, a clever wife, 3 boys small when I left them, men now. I never held them. My soul yearns here below, watching great ones come and go. No sign of Odysseus. Did he even know our names? Under the waves, crabs scour my bones, and curly seaweed grows through my eye holes. The sorceress Circe sorceress Circe, transformed many mariners into tame wild animals. Homer says, mountain wolves and lions were roaming round the grounds. She'd bewitched them herself. She gave them magic drugs, but they wouldn't attack my men. They just came pawing up around them, fawning, swishing their long tails. So my poem is called Ex-Mariner on Circe's Island. Even the book is falling apart now. Ex-Mariner on Circe's Island. I like being a leopard, a tame one, playing around the feet of fools who moor on Circe's shore. They're always thrilled to stroke my fur, which feels so good. You'd think I'd want to eat them, luscious breasts and bones, but the man within still holds me fast. My comrades pine for their sweet wives, for the jolt of war in phalanx, one hand holding a curved shield. But I can do without my hands. Instead, I'm fast as blowing leaves, and the world I left behind is just a mist. On my final trip, Circe cast her spell, so now I'm young. Eat fresh kill, and wait for the next transition, when the leopard in me advances another step, and sweet girls turn to prey. Meanwhile, the sirens sing so beautifully that ships head for their island and crash on the rocks. A bit more Homer. Circe tells Odysseus that the high, thrilling song of the sirens will transfix him, lolling there in their meadow, round them heaps of corpses, rotting away, rags of skin shriveling on their bones. So this is one of the sirens speaking. Siren. The dead are all around. Young men mostly, not even ones I'd want. I've seen too much of stupid youth. We sing, but always the same song, as if we had no choice. The churning sea makes rhythms too deep to shift. And we are not friends. We sang the brother of one of us to death, and even she keeps singing, though now she always turns toward where he washed ashore. We don't breathe, but still we smell the dead. Hoped ships won't come, even as our voices pull them in. I hear the booms and cries when their hulls are crushed. Two more. 6 mariners died trying to go between Charybdis the whirlpool and Scylla the six-headed monster. All the mariners sing this next one together in the tempo of rowing. Facing Scylla. The ocean's foam is full of glass. The glass the mast flung is stripped. We strip the mast behind breakers. Behind the mast, we break the foam. Our eyes speak smoke beyond the quay. We give the quay our eyes inside the glass. The night, the wave, the foam, we heave our hearts. Hearts of foam take broken glass. We breathe, we bleed to make the grass our home the beach, the bleeding grass, the glass, the sea we give alone. We row the foam, we sense the mouth. It opens in a moment, smoked. Sea foam smokes the glass we row. The mast, the past, come floating on the foam. Alone we oar the past, we dream a spar. Mouthing roar seizes in the sea, grabs us from the glassy foam, alone. And the last poem I'll read, and the last poem in the book, wonders what Zeus must think of this world now. A couple of people have said to me they thought I made a much nicer person, well, God, out of him than he really was. But you see what you think. It was inspired by W.H. Auden's great poem, The Shield of Achilles, which contrasts the beauty of the ancient world with the jackbooted horrors of World War II. This poem is written in one of the 2 meters of Auden's poem, that is iambic pentameter, and Zeus is speaking. Thank you all very much again for your attention, and lovely evening, and thank you, James. Zeus. I had in mind a swirl of perfect clouds, young men carved from lovely ranks of air, nations of heroines sensible and proud, and no bloodshed without a just account. I can't look down to see what it's become. Poison ivy blooms in every swamp, while dogs go hungry in the filthy gloom of alleyways behind the tattoo shop. I wanted babies smelling of sweet milk in their mother's laps and free of loss, trees that grew deep green or full of snow, not eaten by beetles, burned and cut for food. No bombs should drop on those without a spear. No illnesses for children in a drought. No faceless governments that cannot feel. No rain that burns the trees and dries the mouth. I had in mind a simple, favored place with greenery that shaded all from pain, rivers full of iridescent trout and blooming roses shedding heavy rain. I try to feel the care of those who live caught by age, caught by time's decay, who lift their heads to sunlight, pray to me, and wait for me to speak the grief away. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Let's give the poets another round of applause for their opportunity. We have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. Thank you so much all for coming. If you can all please put your chairs up against one of the walls, that'd be very great.
All in the same mood. Right.
Let's toss this back there.